So recently with the monetization of YouTube Shorts, I've tried out producing short-form content, and I'm not a huge fan of it, but given how much exposure it seems to get as everyone battles for the ADHD-driven eyeballs of Gen Z, I thought it'd be worth a try. So I did a few short-form reviews, including a few for the controversial Velma TV show, and there was one thing I said that seemed to confuse a lot of people when I referred to the show being so bad it felt like right-wing propaganda. Right-wing propaganda? Right-wing? How, bruh? Wait, what? What do you mean right-wing? It's mostly made by Democrats. I never thought about it that way, but this would make very good right-wing propaganda. Since the format of 60-second short doesn't really give you much time to fully articulate a broader idea, I figured why not go into a little more depth about what I meant. Is Velma really right-wing propaganda? What the hell did I mean? Well, let's get back into it as we gather our pink pussy hats, MAGA hats, and Antifa super soldier masks as we dive back into the central nexus of the ever-expanding culture wars to poke and prod Velma so we can finally figure out if it was a right-wing psyop all along. You gotta love to be gone back yet. Don't you grab it. So Velma is an interesting beast, the adult-oriented reboot of Scooby-Doo that does not feature Scooby-Doo, but instead focuses on everyone's favorite nerd girl icon, putting her at the center of the stage while completely eliminating the most recognizable and popular characters of Scooby-Doo and Shaggy, while revamping the entire series' aesthetic and filtering it as a parody of bad teens doing bad things, high school melodramas like Riverdale and Euphoria. Velma sets up an origin story for the original Mystery Crew Inc. as we see them become friends and evolve into the mystery solvers we know and love. The series was developed by Mindy Kaling, who sought to update the homogenous and aggressively white aesthetic of the Scooby Gang to better reflect the world we live in. Velma became the Indian self-insert for Kaling herself. Shaggy is now Norville and black. Daphne is Asian, and Fred gets to still be white because you need a straight white whipping boy to serve as the blunt vessel for all your pseudo-leftist edgy humor.
Fred's a rich white guy with a tiny dong.
The series made its debut with a teaser trailer poking fun at fans who complain about race swapping in modern adaptations.
If there is one thing the internet agrees on, it's that you should never change anything ever. I hope you die. Well, at least Judy's still white.
When it premiered, it did the impossible, something I thought I'd never see in the modern age. It brought together both sides of the political spectrum to unite over their sheer loathing of it. The right-leaning Chudiverse made up of anti-woke commentators loved to mock it because to them it seemed like the perfect apotheosis of all the trends of woke liberal leftism converging together to take an old beloved IP and completely ruin it in a vain attempt to court modern audiences. The left hated it because it was spiteful, mean, and not particularly funny, while trying to seemingly reflect their values of combating the patriarchy, sexism, and white supremacy. It was the worst of both worlds, but despite this, it was apparently the most successful animated series to launch at HBO Max, according to a press release, or what will become just Max by the time this video goes live. It even got a second season, but I don't think it was that much of a success since we have no verifiable metrics to judge it by. I don't think the hate watching got it a second season, given the fact that animation takes so long to produce. It was probably already greenlit before the first season aired. Now to clarify, I don't think it's right-wing propaganda or some secret psyop by Mindy Kaling because she's actually a secret Trump supporter. The show wears its political leanings on its sleeve with plenty of jokes about sexism, the patriarchy, and digs at capitalism. But all these jokes are not particularly funny. They are designed to receive applause and a positive affirmation rather than genuine laughter. It's a trend you see a lot in left-leaning comedy, where comedians don't really have comedy sets as much as little soapboxes where they point out some kind of gross ill of the world with no punchline, but then they expect the audience to applaud in agreement.
2. Become an expert in everything. Complete every side quest. Earn every achievement. Be prepared for any reference or joke, because if you're not, fake gamer girl alert! Suddenly, that low-cut shirt you're wearing was not a choice you made because you felt good about your bomb-ass cleavage when you woke up this morning. Suddenly, you're a succubus. You're only in it for the attention. Because what real gamer doesn't know that the skeleton hanging by its ankles from the ceiling of the Bjorn ice caves on the island of Solstheim in the Blood Moon expansion of the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind was obviously a Star Wars reference?
That's how most of the political jokes in Velma are structured. They're also structured so poorly to the point where it feels like it was a Babylon Bee video filled with jokes that were so on the nose it would be featured on their website as a parody of the kind of entertainment produced by liberal, leftist, woke Hollywood. For those of you who don't know, Babylon Bee is a conservative comedy news site that tries to be the Onion for the MAGA nation. In fact, here's a little thing I put together featuring some of Velma's best jokes, along with a parody of Lord of the Rings from the Babylon Bee.
I thought lesbians were good at solving crimes. It's like the one positive stereotype perpetuated by cop shows.
I am Gwenriel, of a region. My pronouns are she, her.
White girl with too much money?
Ableism and mansplaining? You Numenorians are so privileged, what with your patriarchal society.
If I may.
Excuse me, I'm speaking.
I only have $50 in the budget to combat centuries of toxic masculinity.
Fred's a rich white guy with a tiny dong.
Heavily implying he's going to eat me!
Don't mock ethnic food choices.
That's some white people shit.
See what I mean? Now, comedy is subjective, and nothing kills a joke faster than putting it under a microscope. But the core of Velma is that these jokes are punching up at the right people in the places of power, aka white and straight people. The people who have historically held most of the power in this country and throughout history. Velma seems to think that stating these hard-hitting truths is side-splitting comedy and sticking it to the powers that be in a way that its young, woke, and politically aware audience should find hilarious. While the Babylon Bee is showing that these values make no sense in a traditional genre narrative, and the humor comes from juxtaposing these values in a setting like Lord of the Rings, where an angry orc is just an aggressive fantasy monster, and not some underprivileged minority who needs to be given special privileges to deal with issues of systemic oppression. Not everyone is going to find the Babylon Bee thing funny, but to a certain audience it hits hard, where it feels like every day some popular IP is being ransacked from its peaceful slumber so it can be injected with the pink reanimator fluid filled with progressive TikTok socialist memes. That's what I mean by Velma is so bad that it feels like right-wing propaganda. It's a show whose humor is so on the nose it feels like you could post clips of it on a conservative comedy site like the Babylon Bee, and it could sit side by side with their other parodies. It would feel right at home. In some ways, Velma feels like the potential endpoint, the culmination of a decade-long culture war hitting its nadir. 2022 was a banner year for having popular nerd shit sacrificed at the altar of progressive politics. The Halo TV show debuted where the Master Chief is paired with an Asian teen who's seeking to fight back and rebel against the fascist UNSC regime, instead of focusing on the genocidal alien covenant. Resident Evil was remade into a young adult series where the previously white villain Albert Wesker, one of the most beloved video game villains, was recast as the late Lance Reddick, where he was a father raising two mixed race girls in a storyline that only had a passing resemblance to anything from the video games and features some of the cringiest dialogue.
Right. I mostly just read Zootopia porn, so.
Which I guess is what a 50-year-old writer thinks the Gen Z TikTok audience wants. You had Rings of Power that sought to take the Eurocentric Tolkien mythology and try to bring more diversity without trying to do any world building to justify it, while also bringing in painful real-world allegories like this scene where humans complain about elves taking their jobs.
Workers who don't sleep, don't tire, don't age. I say,
they took our jobs! They took your jobs!
Dig your jab! Dig your jab!
You had the debacle of The Witcher, which was supposed to be Netflix's answer to Game of Thrones, imploding as Henry Cavill left the series after being polite enough for 2 seasons, but growing tired of being pushed around by writers and producers that seem to have nothing but contempt for the original source material. I can go on and on with other examples like the live-action Cowboy Bebop show, the Obi-Wan show, which seemed like it was just a backdoor pilot to get a black female Star Wars series off the ground. Everything in Marvel Phase 4, the list goes on and on. But the dam is busted. What was once a veritable gold rush in the streaming world has been stemmed as the Netflix stock has reached a steep decline after being unable to maintain infinite subscriber growth. Disney has had to make huge cutbacks with massive layoffs. Streaming sites can no longer afford to just spend an infinite amount of cash and greenlight every pitch of the rainbow or trans flag to appeal towards the tastes of a few Twitter activists who mostly don't even bother to watch the representation they demand to see.
I mostly just read Zootopia porn, so.
Less money means taking less chances and hedging your bets on things that are ultimately safer. Top Gun Maverick was a breakout success in 2022, showcasing that you can have the old form of more classical Hollywood storytelling that is not beholden to Twitter activists and make a shit ton of money. Top Gun started a cultural trend. It showed that there is still a hunger for mainstream entertainment and old-fashioned machismo values. I think we're going to start to see a sea of change to meet that demand. The other big blow-up came from the success of Hogwarts Legacy, that despite just about every gaming publication with a few exceptions running caveats on their coverage of J.K. Rowling, condemning her and trans activists, imploring all their followers not to buy the game, and even going as far as building a website to check who has streamed the game as some kind of self-regulated purity test, the game still has sold over 12 million copies, making around $850 million. People like fun more than they like trans people, or to be more specific, they like fun more than being guilted by trans activists. The boycott was one of the biggest failures in the online space, coming to the point where even the New York Times wrote an article in Rowling's defense. The success of the game spoke volumes in terms of how little real power and influence the terminally online left have in the real world. I personally think the entertainment industry is apolitical. It is ultimately a money-making machine and is willing to twist and bend towards the tides of a changing culture, but its ultimate driver is profit. I'm not a Trump fan, but the fact of the matter is 75 million people still voted for him, and their dollars are just as valid as the 81 million who voted for Biden. And while you might not hear about it much online, the fact that Taylor Sheridan has created a mini empire from the success of Yellowstone just goes to show that there's big money to be made in content tailored towards that audience. I think we've seen the convergence of two things. For a long time, we had an industry that was being pressured into giving more representation and diversity in front of and behind the camera, and also an industry that was dead afraid of risking money on anything that didn't have some built-in audience or nostalgia factor. So thus, you had projects that are based on some beloved IP that were created in a different era, forced to be transformed into something they were never intended to be, usually alienating the original audience and failing to draw in anyone new. Some people like to talk about the alt-right pipeline in terms of how supposedly creators like PewDiePie make an off-color joke and that eventually feeds young people into finding other communities that eventually convert them into white supremacists or Nazis. I don't think that's entirely true. I think a more effective pipeline for the right or alt-right has been the constant deluge of progressive pandering shows. The normcore audience goes to things like Ghostbusters 2016 or The Last Jedi and wonder what the hell happened. Why is Ghostbusters being ruined by queef jokes and terrible improv? Why is Luke Skywalker spitefully drinking alien titty milk while he leaves his nephew to terrorize the galaxy after thinking about murdering him in his sleep? Why is this version of something I used to love so goddamn terrible? Then they go into the creator sphere and find the Chudiverse, a colloquial name used for anti-diversity, anti-woke, usually right-leaning content creators making videos roasting and reaming these bastardizations of their previously favorite things. And then from there they get introduced to other creators in the space by watching live streams where they're exposed to anti-feminist rhetoric and go deeper into hearing more extreme opinions like the election was a fraud, global warming isn't real, the vaccine is poison, the feminists are working with billionaire pedophiles to destroy masculinity and make men weak. Just a deeper and darker rabbit hole filled with more extreme conspiracies and dangerous personalities. Like when the anti-diversity focused YouTube channel Nerdrotic celebrated his 200th episode of his live stream show by having the infamous Alex Jones call in and partake in the festivities against the globalist elite. But this path seems to start so innocuously. First by watching their beloved Scooby-Doo cartoon ruined by progressive creators, that begins this journey into more conservative or red-pilled ideology. I don't think diversity is inherently bad. I can point to a lot of great examples where diversity has led to great, engaging stories. Take a look at the success of the first Black Panther movie, the recent Oscar winner Everything Everywhere All at Once, the music chart-topping success of Encanto, Squid Games, Nope from Jordan Peele. The thing is that most of these were original stories that told their narratives on their own terms. They weren't dragged by the dead weight of being attached to some other intellectual property, like being turned into a new Star Wars show or being thrown into a video game adaptation, or being forced upon some animated Disney movie made decades ago. They were all original ideas. So in conclusion, was Velma intentional right-wing propaganda? Is Mindy Kaling a secret Trump supporter? I don't think so. But I think the show is so terrible that it validated just about everything you'd hear from a Chud-adjacent creators like The Critical Drinker, Nerdrotic, The Quartering, or Geeks and Gamers. It was a grand woke wicker man built from the accumulation of right-wing strawmen, culminating in a blazing inferno that might mark the definitive end of an era towards progressive-focused mainstream entertainment. Because a Star Wars movie with a female lead co-starring with an Asian American actress might be one step towards equality and representation, but the generosity towards that equality in our capitalist world only goes as far as people are willing to buy the toys, and there are a lot of unsold Rey and Rose Tico action figures. Hope you enjoyed that video. I know it's the first long-form video I've done in a hot minute. I was seduced by the sexy allure of YouTube Shorts, the siren's call of growth and virality, which is fun for the first hot minute. But now that endorphin rush has cooled off and it's time to get back to that long-form content game. So if you like this, of course, thank you for watching. Here's the uncomfortable part where I ask you to do the cringy things all YouTubers ask. Like, comment, subscribe, put me in the good graces of our new overlord, Neil. And while you're at it, I'd like to thank my Patreon supporters, my own personal Scooby gang who support my work. They are, of course, the Shonen Ronin, Walking the Steps, Carla Hoffman, Aaron Toney, and Joseph Malty. These are the mystery solvers who keep me in business, so of course, if you want to join the gang, just click the Patreon link coming up. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you whenever my next video is finished.